Hello, everybody. I'm audible.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes.
Yes, we can, and I hope you can hear us. So, hello, a very good day to all of you joining us from different parts of the world. On behalf of the Wildlife Institute of India and its Category 2 Center for World Natural Heritage Management and Training for Asia and the Pacific region, under the auspices of UNESCO, it is my pleasure to welcome the guests and participants to this webinar titled Bastions of Conservation, Natural World Heritage in the Asia Pacific. In fact, before starting, I should not miss mentioning that this occasion is symbolic also in many senses, that the World Heritage Convention celebrated its 49th anniversary just 2 days earlier on the 16th of November. And in fact, this webinar is our own very modest contribution to the 50th year celebrations of this historic convention. And well, as regards the schedule of this webinar, we will have opening remarks by Dr. Dhananjai Mohan, Director of the Wildlife Institute of India, an overview of the Wildlife Institute Category 2 Center by Dr. Gautam Talukdar, the faculty in charge, and of course, the keynote by Mr. Debonnet, Chief of the Natural Heritage Unit at World Heritage Center, UNESCO Paris. Participants will have time for questions at the end and are also welcome to put them in the chat box. We'll be very glad to read them out and take those questions forward. Thank you. My name is Neeraj Kakoti. I'm from the Wildlife Institute Category 2 Center. So before we commence proceedings, allow me to provide a very brief context on the theme of this webinar by highlighting the sheer diversity of this region that we're talking about, the Asia and the Pacific. In fact, when you consider the political, economic, and the social dimensions of this region, it is the largest continent. It has the biggest nations to the smallest island states. It has the most populous countries to those with only a few thousand people. Very high income economies to the least developed countries, and landlocked states to sea-locked atolls. It is home to all the major religions of the world, and nearly 2/3 of the world's self-identified indigenous people reside in this region. So no wonder the diversity is beyond doubt of this very large mass of land and water. Physically, in fact, it has the world's highest mountain, the deepest lake, the highest city, largest reef, biggest mangrove, the driest desert. Ecosystems range from forests to marine, desert to freshwater, grasslands to the tundra. Climatic differences, they range from the hot and humid tropics to the cold temperate zones. And these factors have specifically influenced actually the evolution of natural heritage in this region, leading to, in fact, some of the cases which has very high degree of endemism. Geological formations and volcanic activity have further enriched the heritage of this region. Owing to these features, a very enormous diversity of flora, fauna under in situ conservation are represented in this region. I will not go into further details because this will be taken up by many of the speakers that come after me, and I will leave it to them. But it is in this larger context that UNESCO's World Heritage Convention plays a very significant role in conserving some of these most iconic species, habitats, and landscapes. In fact, 82 of the total 257 natural and mixed heritage sites of the world, that is a third of the total, are actually found in this Asia-Pacific region, the largest among all the other regions that UNESCO has designated, whether it is North America and Europe, the African continent, the Arab states, as well as the Northern Asian. So thank you for being with us. I heartily welcome you. And as we go on to this next part of this webinar, it is my privilege now to invite Dr. Dhananjai Mohan, Director, Wildlife Institute of India and Head of the Category 2 Center based in Dehradun, India. He is also the national focal point for natural and mixed World Heritage Sites in India for the periodic reporting for Asia and Pacific region. Dr. Mohan is a senior officer of the Indian Forest Service with very long management experience in planning and protected areas, as well as sound academic credentials in leading forestry and wildlife institutions of the country. Sir, please be expected at the mic. Thank you.
Okay, I hope I'm audible.
Yes, sir. Yeah. You can carry on, sir.
And I welcome all the participants of this very important webinar today. And I particularly would like to welcome our speaker of the day, Mr. Debonnet, Chief of UNET Natural Heritage World Heritage Center, UNESCO Paris. And this is a very important webinar on conservation, natural heritage, world heritage in the Asia Pacific. There's some feedback happening, I think. I hope I'm still audible. Hello.
Yes, sir. It's fine now, sir. There was some echo.
Yeah.
I think another device was on or something.
I mean, natural heritage sites have been created in the world for now nearly 4 to 5 decades. And we have a chain of natural heritage sites, which are areas of outstanding universal value. We in India also have a few natural sites and a couple of mixed sites as well, which have the natural component. And I had a long association with the World Heritage Sites. I was working in the Himalayas in my early part of my career in the 90s, and that was the time when I got an opportunity to manage the Nanda Devi National Park, one of the initial 5 natural World Heritage Sites of India. And I must say that being a World Heritage Site, being nominated as a World Heritage Site, it had given a lot of importance to this area, the right kind of importance, and that helped us take the management to much higher levels. And in fact, I got the opportunity of, in fact, that area, the Nanda Devi National Park, which is an area of about 630 square kilometers. This is an outstanding area surrounded by very high peaks, some of them towering above 7,000 meters. So these are one of the highest peaks of the whole world. And like a cradle in the middle was this Nanda Devi National Park. And as per the whole idea of these sites, this place has been kept inviolate for the last 40 years. 1982, we stopped all the activities in this area. And prior to that, it was a very important site for mountaineering, because people used to come and camp in the national park area and scale the peaks all around it. And in the process, they did damage the ecosystem there considerably. And that is why the government decided to declare it as a national park and also close all such kind of activities. So, and of course, to further improve management, the government decided to include a large area around it as a buffer, and the whole area was renamed as the Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve. Of course, the national park continues as a national World Heritage Site, and this Biosphere Reserve, which had all kinds of land uses, of course, many of them natural land uses, but there were people there, had dependencies, and since then there has been a conscious effort to take care of those people who are there surrounding the national park and help in generating better livelihoods, and also in a way try to conserve the traditional practices. I again had a great fortune of writing the first management plan for this Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve. Could the time when I could learn and understand a lot of good things about this area. And one very important practice that we started doing was the use of this area as an ecological benchmark. And to further do scientific process and scientific way of monitoring this area, we started, the government started what are called ecological monitoring, decadal in ecological monitoring. And we, every 10 years, the government has been sending expeditions, because it's a very difficult area. If you have to go inside and study, do some research or monitoring, it almost goes into expedition mode. And we had to take the team of scientists inside, and they started doing this decadal monitoring. First one of which was done in '92, and since then, every decade we have had one such monitoring expedition. And results have been very encouraging. The area has recovered, and the kind of floral and faunal richness of this area is just unparalleled. And one of the finest densities of mountain ungulates, mountain predators, and of course, a whole range of high altitude flora. In the early 2000s, to I think 2006 to be precise, another area very in close proximity of Nanda Devi National Park, Valley of Flowers National Park, another very famous area, was also added to this site as a World Heritage site. And this is another area which has got unique values. This is another area where since 1982 there has been no grazing, only some limited amount of tourism takes place. Which is only a day tourism, because people go there, spend some time and come out of it. So that's another area of amazing floral values. And these two areas have actually been serving as perhaps the only sites in the whole of Himalayas which have been kept inviolate for 4 decades. So these are truly the bastions of conservation, ecological benchmarks, and I'm sure they will continue to serve this role for times to come, and help in overall biodiversity conservation in the whole of Himalayas. So I'm also eager to listen to our guest speaker today, and I'm sure most of the participants are. So once again, a big thank you to our guest speaker for having agreed to join us today, and all the participants who are there from various countries. And I'm sure there are quite a few World Heritage Site managers also joining us today to get benefited. Once again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for this very valuable sharing of your real world experience dealing with protected areas and natural heritage sites in particular. And your experience goes back a long way. I think your information and your insights are going to be indeed very valuable. It's okay. So now I would like to call upon Dr. Gautam Talukdar, who is scientist at the Wildlife Institute of India and in charge of the Category 2 Center here. In fact, Dr. Talukdar has an experience of over 2 decades in the area of landscape ecology and modeling. He serves as an expert for both the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, as well as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. He's also a member of the IUCN World Commission on Protected Areas. So may I request Dr. Gautam to please come to the screen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neeraj, for the introduction. And I'll quickly give an overview of the work that we do here in the Wildlife Institute of India Category 2 Center. So briefly, Wildlife Institute of India is an autonomous institution under the Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change of the Government of India. And it was established in the year 1982. And its main mandate is building capacity through training, education, and research in the field of wildlife conservation. And Wildlife Institute of India has catered to professionals beyond India in the wider region of the South and the Southeast and the Central Asia as well. Now, acknowledging the capability of the Wildlife Institute of India, the category 2 center under the auspices of UNESCO was granted in 2013, and the government of India signed an agreement in 2015. And the mission of the center is to strengthen the implementation of the World Heritage Convention in Asia and the Pacific region in natural heritage conservation by building the capacity of all stakeholders through training, research, dissemination of information, and network building. We do a lot of capacity building workshops, right from disaster risk reduction, ecosystem services, culture nature journey, World Heritage and pandemics, transboundary World Heritage site, conservation management, rights-based approach, intangible heritage, community awareness. So different kinds of workshops we do. We also carry out a master's program in heritage management. And very shortly, you can keep your eyes open for a certificate course in heritage management. It would be a short course of roughly around 45 days. And having said this, we also end up conducting a lot of training courses other than workshop, which includes, again, disaster risk reduction, open standards. In fact, for the past 2 days, we have been having a workshop on application of remote sensing data for World Heritage sites. We also carry out a lot of advisory services with respect to World Heritage Center in terms of periodic reporting, in consultation with IUCN regarding the outlook of the World Heritage sites, and a nomination for advisory service for nominating both World Heritage sites as well as for the dossier preparation. So without taking much of the time, because we are more interested to hear to our keynote speaker, Guy Debonnet, I thank you all for being here today, and over to Neeraj so that he can conduct.
So thank you, Dr. Gautam, for sharing about the Wildlife Institute Category 2 Center and the range of activities that we are involved in. So we are now ready with our keynote speaker, Mr. Guy Debonnet from the World Heritage Center. He has a master's in bioscience engineering, and from 1989 to 2001, he worked on nature conservation and rural development projects in various African countries. He was also a senior advisor on environment to the Belgian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He joined UNESCO World Heritage Center in 2002 as a specialist for natural heritage and is currently the chief of the Natural Heritage Unit. May I call upon Mr. Debonnet to please present his address.
Thank you very much. And thank you, first of all, to the Wildlife Institute of India to organize this meeting, which I think is extremely important and also coming at a good time with the 49th anniversary. I think the World Heritage Convention has evolved a lot, and we have more than 1,000 sites in 194 state parties, and we need all the help as Secretariat we can get to assist the state parties. And I think Category 2 centers like the Wildlife Institute of India play a very important role. So let me start by trying to share my screen, which is always the most tricky part of any presentation. So I hope it will work. Can you confirm that you can see the screen? The presentation?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
it's absolutely fine now. Yeah, we can see it on.
Okay, great. So as mentioned in the introduction, my name is Guy Debonnet. I work at the UNESCO World Heritage Center since 2002. And I'm currently the chief of the Natural Heritage Unit. And before joining the center, I worked for a long time in Africa, including quite some years in one of the World Heritage sites, Kahuzi-Biega National Park in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Perhaps for people in Asia, not such a known park, but one of the parks that has gorillas as the flagship species. Let me just go to the next slide. Yes. So before starting talking about World Heritage, I wanted to mention, of course, that World Heritage is one of the designations that UNESCO is the site-based conservation instruments of UNESCO. For the moment, we have, as I said, more than 1,000 World Heritage sites in 167 countries, spread all over the world. But there are also 727 biosphere reserves in 131 countries and 169 geoparks in 44 countries. So I think these three instruments are all important instruments that are also to a large extent complementary. I think the director of the Center of the Wildlife Institute of India already mentioned Nanda Devi, which is also part of a biosphere reserve. And I think there is a real complementarity between these instruments. In addition, there is also Ramsar. Ramsar is not a UNESCO instrument, but it is still a site-based convention. And UNESCO is the depository of the Ramsar Convention. If a country ratifies the Ramsar Convention, they send their instrument to UNESCO. So together, these sites cover more than 10 million square kilometers, which is a very important area in the world. It's about the size of India, the size of China. So I think it's a very interesting subset of protected areas that can be used to experiment best practices in terms of conservation and sustainable development. Now, today we are, of course, going to speak about the World Heritage Convention, which, as you all know, was adopted in 1972. 1972, the year of the Stockholm Convention, the first environmental meeting, big environmental meeting in the world, and also a time when several of the biodiversity-related conventions were decided. There was the CITES Convention and the Ramsar Convention, and also the Convention on Migratory Species. All of these conventions had their birth in this period, which was a period where the world started to realize that the environment was being threatened and that there was a need to better protect natural resources. And of course, the World Heritage Convention is a little bit special in this context because it's a convention that deals both with nature and culture. And in fact, if you look at the history, there were two separate initiatives. There was an initiative spearheaded by France to work on a convention for cultural heritage. And then there was an initiative led by the US with support of IUCN to develop a convention for outstanding natural places. And these two ideas were brought together in this in the World Heritage Convention, which really has as its objective to protect natural and cultural heritage of outstanding universal value. I think the World Heritage Convention is, of course, one of the biodiversity-related conventions, and we work together with the other biodiversity-related conventions, including the ones I already mentioned, and also the CBD. But it's an interesting convention because it approaches biodiversity from the aspect of heritage. I think, and this is really the big difference with a lot of the other biodiversity conventions, is that the rationale of the World Heritage Convention is really that we need to protect nature, not only because of its scientific value, because of its importance in terms of ecosystem services, in terms of protecting the web of life, but also because it's important for us as a species. And in that sense, even the protection of natural sites is somehow a cultural phenomenon, because I think the humans are the only species in the world that really consider that nature is also part of their heritage. And that is really exemplified by the convention. Of course, the convention still is most known for its cultural sites. And of course, also the majority of sites inscribed on the World Heritage List are cultural sites. This is one of the best known cultural sites in Asia, Angkor Wat in Cambodia. And if you look at the numbers, then we, of course, it looks that natural heritage is the poorer or the smaller brother in the family. But if you look at it from the aspect of surface, I think the situation is very different, because of course most of the natural World Heritage sites cover quite extensive geographic areas. We know that there are 4 criteria to protect, nominate World Heritage, natural criteria to protect World Heritage sites, and all of them are very well represented in Asia. The first one is the criterion 7, perhaps the most subjective or most cultural of our criteria, because it talks about extraordinary natural phenomena. Very often it's about exceptional landscapes. It can also be about other exceptional natural phenomena. I'm thinking, for example, on the Serengeti in Africa, where you have the wildebeest migration, the largest animal migration in the world, or the monarch butterfly in Mexico, where you have these millions of butterflies coming to winter in a certain area. So it's about exceptional natural phenomena, but most of the sites that are nominated on this criteria are nominated because of their exceptional landscape values. We also have a whole set of geological sites, ranging from caves to volcanoes to mountains, and so these are also a very important subset of World Heritage sites. But then we come to, I think, for us naturalists, the 2 most significant criteria, criterion 9 and criterion 10. Criterion 9 is about ecosystems and about undisturbed large ecosystems. And so we have a very important set of sites that protect some of the best and most important and most intact and pristine ecosystems in the world. And also these are very often very large areas. And many of them, as was already mentioned in the introduction, are actually situated in Asia, with the Great Barrier Reef as an example of a marine site. Marine sites, Great Barrier Reef was the first marine site inscribed on the World Heritage List. And for a long time, marine sites were really underrepresented on the World Heritage List. I think today that has changed. We have a lot of marine sites, including some of the biggest, our biggest natural sites are all marine sites. Great Barrier Reef used to be the biggest natural World Heritage site. It's now the 3rd one. We have another marine site, Phoenix Island in the Pacific, that is today the second, the largest one, and then there is also Papahanaumokuakea in Hawaii. So some of the largest World Heritage sites are these marine sites. We have also important steppe areas and important wetlands. An example are the landscapes of the Doria, which is a transboundary site between Mongolia and the Russian Federation. And we have, of course, many forest sites, of which, again, many are situated in Asia. I'm thinking of Sumatra, the tropical rainforest of Sumatra, or here, the Hirkan forest in the Islamic Republic of Iran. And apart from these, we have deserts, we have savannas, we have steppe ecosystems. I think the World Heritage List today really includes a very diverse set of ecosystems. And then we have criterion 10, the criterion linked to biodiversity. But if you look at the way, of course, in 1972, biodiversity was a term that didn't really was very known. And if you look at the description of the criteria, it actually speaks about endangered species. So criteria 10 is really about biodiversity, but it's also about exceptional species. And I think this is where there is the link with the heritage aspect of this convention, because people identify with some of these very iconic species in the world, like the panda, or like the gorilla, or like the tiger. And these are really species that have a heritage value. So to me, criterion 10, it is about biodiversity, but it's also about heritage species, I would say. And it's not only, of course, about mammals, it's about also about plants, like the exceptional plants we can find in Kinabalu in Malaysia. So with this, we have a large number of natural sites on the list. We also have a very limited number, today still a very limited number of mixed sites. These are sites that I think exemplify most the idea of the convention, because they are inscribed for both their natural and their cultural values. And I think for a long time, we had very few of these sites. I see that over the last couple of years, there is an increase in the mixed sites, which I think is a very good thing, but because it's really a good example of the fact that this convention is not about nature separate and culture separate, but about nature and culture and heritage together. So all these sites, we come back to what is the key concept of the World Heritage Convention, which in our convention language we call outstanding universal value. It's a little bit of a strange term, perhaps. It's not very clear, perhaps, but it is defined in the preamble of the convention as the parts of the cultural and natural heritage that are of outstanding interest and therefore need to be preserved as part of the world heritage of mankind as a whole. And I think this definition shows an important number of clues on what really we mean with outstanding universal value. I think it is very clear from that paragraph that the convention is not there to protect all heritage sites. Of course, all heritage is worthy of protection, but this convention is really about those heritage sites that can be considered outstanding, exceptional, and that from a global perspective, so universally outstanding. And it is also really a global approach, because we're looking at it from the perspective of humanity, of mankind as a whole. And the idea of this convention and of the fathers and the mothers of the convention in 1972 was really that we want to bring together a number of sites where the entire world can agree that these are part of our common heritage, and where we have to do our utmost to ensure that these sites are well conserved and transferred to future generations. And so this aspect of World Heritage is a little bit shown in this graph, which kind of shows that we are the top of the pyramid. We want really on this convention to protect the sites that have this outstanding universal value, that are exceptional at a global scale. And this doesn't mean that the other sites, other heritage sites are not important. Sites can be important at the national level, can be important at the regional level. There are also other international instruments, but World Heritage, really the idea is the jewels of the crown, the Nobel Prize for natural heritage. It's really the idea to have to bring in this list the most important and most exceptional sites. And I want to come back briefly to the concept of outstanding universal value, because often when we think about outstanding universal value, we think of, yes, a site has to be exceptional in terms of the criteria. It has to have exceptional geology, exceptional biodiversity. It has to be an exceptional ecosystem. But outstanding universal value is more than that. To be able to nominate a site, or to be able to be inscribed on the World Heritage List, you have to meet at least one of these criteria, and many of our sites meet actually more than one natural criteria. But you also have to ensure that the integrity is guaranteed. Integrity meaning that we want to make sure that the values that are for which this site is inscribed are also guaranteed in terms of, for example, the size of the sites. So that this site has the potential to, the values in this site have the potential to survive into eternity. And also there is the important aspect of protection and management. There needs to be a system of protection in place, a legal protection that makes sure that these values can be conserved, but also there needs to be management. And I think this is a very important aspect. We need management for our sites. All the sites on the World Heritage List, and I think all natural sites in the world, are of course subject to different threats. The question is, will these threats degrade the values of these sites? And I think that's why we have protection, and that's why we have management. The management is there to ensure that the threats that are inevitably there are controlled, are managed, so that the integrity and the values of the site are not being degraded. So in terms of World Heritage, we talked before that there is a relatively small number of natural and mixed sites if we compare it to the cultural sites we have on the World Heritage list. And often people say, oh, natural heritage is underrepresented. I don't really agree with that, because I think it's not about numbers of sites, it's also about how much area is conserved in these sites. And today we have around 370 million hectares of land and sea that are conserved in these sites. So because, of course, many of our sites are extremely large. And even if you look at it in terms of the protected areas in the world, most of our sites are protected areas, often national parks. This actually is 8% of the world's protected areas. So I think there might be less in numbers, but if we look at it from the perspective of surface and if we look at it in terms of the global coverage of protected areas, I think there are now in the database, IUCN database or the World Database on Protected Areas, I think there are 14,000 protected areas in the world. We have only a little bit more than 250 sites, but they do cover 8% of the world's protected areas, and they do have been recognized for having the most important values, and also for having integrity, so having a size that is sufficient to protect these values in the future. So I think this is really important to take into consideration. Now, if we look at it, how these are distributed around the world, we have 110 countries that have natural and or mixed World Heritage sites in their territory. We have 194 state parties in the convention, so there is still a number of countries that don't have a natural sites. I think there are also countries perhaps that don't have the potential for a natural sites, because some countries are small, and natural heritage is also not evenly distributed in the world. But if we look at it at a regional level, and we see that 82 are in Asia and the Pacific, 79 are in Europe and North America, 46 are in Latin America and the Caribbean, 44 are in Africa, and 8 in the Arab states. So I think we often speak about the convention in terms of the fact that there is uneven distribution on the world, and that there is a bias towards Europe. This is definitely true for cultural sites, but I think it's much less so for natural sites. The natural sites are actually, I think, quite evenly distributed, especially if you look at you know, these are the regions as we use them in UNESCO. They are not really geographical regions. And in fact, Asia and the Pacific is with 82 is the largest number of sites. But in fact, if you look at the sites in Europe and North America, a lot of them are physically situated in Asia, because they are, for example, sites in Russia. Russia is considered to be part of Europe and North America, but of course, a large part of the Russian Federation is situated in Asia. And so Lake Baikal or the volcanoes of Kamchatka, all of these sites are actually geographically in Asia. So I think there is perhaps still an issue of imbalance, definitely. But I think in terms of natural sites, the issue is much less than what we see in terms of the cultural properties inscribed on the World Heritage List. So the Asia-Pacific region has a wide range of climates, landscapes, and ecosystems. And so about 1/3 of the sites, natural and mixed sites, are situated in this region, in this UNESCO region. And we have 60 natural and 21 in 21 Asian countries. And we have 22 natural and mixed sites in 7 Pacific countries, of which there are 3 in the small island development states in the Pacific. So, of course, these sites are important not only because of the values, the biodiversity or the exceptional geology they have. These sites also provide very important ecosystem services. We're thinking about water, we're thinking about many other services, but today in the discussions today with COP26 just ending, they're also very important in terms of carbon stores. We just before the COP, we launched a new study on the carbon fluxes in natural World Heritage sites, in terrestrial natural World Heritage sites, so mostly in forests. And we worked for that study together with the World Resources Institute and IUCN. And the result of that study showed that an estimated 13 gigatons of carbon is stored in the forests in the natural World Heritage sites. A large part in the above ground biomass, 6.3 gigatons, but also in the roots and in the soils. And 13 gigatons, what does that mean? It's more than the carbon that is contained in the oil reserves, in the proven oil reserves of Kuwait. And if this carbon would be released, it would represent almost 1.3 times the global total annual CO2 emissions from fossil fuels. So a very important ecosystem service these sites bring to the world are the carbon they are storing. And of course, we are not surprised that they store a lot of carbon because, of course, we have a lot of old mature forests on the World Heritage List, but also peatlands, etc. And these are really very important carbon stores. The study also looked at carbon fluxes. So how much carbon is being sequestered by forests in World Heritage sites. A figure where, of course, since we have mostly mature forests on the World Heritage List, we all know that young forests are storing more carbon, absorbing more carbon than mature forests, which have reached a climax. But nevertheless, the figures are also quite impressive. 190 million tons of CO2 are absorbed every year by the forests on the World Heritage List. And this is about half of the emissions of the United Kingdom, half of the CO2 emissions, equivalent emissions of the United Kingdom. So I think carbon, but also many other ecosystem services are being provided by the World Heritage Sites. Now, I think one of the things that really makes this convention unique is the fact that the convention has very robust monitoring and reporting mechanisms. First of all, it's a very concrete convention. It's about sites. And so it is possible to see how these sites are doing since they are listing. And there are 2 mechanisms under the convention to look into that. One is the periodic reporting, and for the moment, Wildlife Institute of India is very much involved in the periodic reporting for the Asia Pacific region. So periodic reporting is the reporting by the state parties. But we have a second tool, which is our state of conservation monitoring system. This, I think, is a very powerful tool of the convention because it allows us to bring to the attention of the committee issues related to World Heritage sites. And this allows the convention to really follow up on the state of conservation and to provide recommendations to the state parties of the convention, how they can improve the conservation of their World Heritage sites. We already talked about periodic reporting, which is currently ongoing in the Asia Pacific region. And Wildlife Institute of India has been a very important partner in that exercise. We are happy that today all the countries in the region have submitted their reports, and for the moment these are being reviewed. and the report is under preparation, including the regional framework action plan, which will be submitted to the committee meeting next year in June. We talked about the state of conservation system, and for the moment, of the 82 sites, natural sites in the natural and mixed sites in the Asia Pacific region, 24 are included in this state of conservation reporting system, which allows this means that these are sites that there are certain concerns in terms of their conservation, and so they are actively followed by the World Heritage Center and IUCN. They are discussed regularly by the World Heritage Committee, which then prepares decisions to provide recommendations to the states parties on how to address some of the issues that are being faced by these sites. We also have, of course, the mechanism of the list of heritage in danger. If a site is in danger of losing its values, then the committee can decide to put it on the list of World Heritage in danger. And today we have 2 sites in the region that are on that list. I think what is important is that we want to insist that this is meant as a positive mechanism. It's not often countries see this as a punishment or as a blacklist. It's not. That's not the idea. I think the idea is to really see how this mechanism can be used to ensure that we don't lose the values for which these sites are being inscribed. And I think there are many success stories of sites that were inscribed on the list in danger. And I just want to mention one from the region and from India, actually, where Manas National Park was on the danger list for quite some years, following the loss of the rhino population there as a result of conflicts. And a program was put in place to address these issues, and today we have again rhinos in Manas National Park, and the area was also taken off the list of World Heritage in danger. So I think it's a mechanism that can really work to protect the sites. Now, in terms of how are our sites doing? I think this is a very important question. Of course, we have the data from the periodic reporting and from the state of conservation reporting, but there is a third tool that is developed by IUCN, which is the Conservation Outlook, which looks in a systematic way to all the sites inscribed on the list, all the natural sites, and repeats that exercise in a regular interval. And if we look at the results on that, we see that a little bit more than half are in the outlook. The conservation outlook is considered good or good with some concerns, but there are actually 37%, more than 1/3 of the sites where there is significant concern on their conservation outlook, or even where the conservation outlook is considered critical. And if you look at the different threats that are observed, the top 3 threats in the last exercise were clearly climate change, invasive and alien species, and tourism. And we see that over the last 3 exercises, climate change has moved up from one of the threats to the number 1 threat to our natural World Heritage sites. Climate change can lead to coral bleaching. We did a study with the marine program, which showed that if the world cannot keep the warming below 2 degrees, with 2 degrees we will lose all the coral reefs on the World Heritage sites. And if we count, with 1.5 degrees, there is a chance for the coral reefs to survive. So I think it's very interesting if you think about the discussions at COP26, what this concretely means for the World Heritage sites. We also see an increasing number of fires and extreme weather events linked to climate change. There are cases of glacial burst, like there was this year in Nanda Devi. I think all of these things, climate change is really a top concern for the convention, and we are for the moment working on an update of the climate change policy. The World Heritage Convention was one of the first conventions that put forward the climate change policy in 2007, and this is currently being updated, and we hope next week in the General Assembly that this will be adopted. The new updated climate change policy will be adopted by the General Assembly. And an important aspect in there is, of course, that we need to really look into developing adaptation plans for our natural World Heritage sites. We also see that we spoke before about the carbon storage in World Heritage sites. We actually see that also World Heritage sites are losing forest cover. Since 2000, according to the analysis on the basis of satellite images, 3.5 million hectares of forest were lost, and so sites are also by losing forest cover are also emitting carbon, and we have actually seen that there are a number of sites that now emit more carbon than they store because of the loss of forest cover. Emission can be linked to fires. We have quite a big issue with fires in a number of World Heritage sites. I think last year many of you followed the fires in Australia, which affected 2 World Heritage sites, the Tasmanian Wilderness and the Greater Blue Mountains. In 2016, we had huge fires around Lake Baikal in Russia. And if you look at these sites, these fires, they actually produce enormous amounts of CO2, 30 metric tons of CO2 in some of these fires, which is more than many countries in the world emit nationally. But of course, it's also it's also linked to increasing land pressures, which result in forest loss in World Heritage sites. And I think an example is, of course, the tropical rainforest heritage of Sumatra, which is on the list of World Heritage in danger, and when there has been a quite important loss of forest cover over the last decade. Invasive species is another very important issue, with also in the Asia Pacific. Examples are the African snail in East Rennell in the Pacific, or species like the water hyacinth or the African catfish in Kelardeo in India. So a very important concern also for many World Heritage sites. And I think to over-tourism, I think we need to also, of course, today with the pandemic, this has perhaps faded away a little bit because tourism has been affected by the pandemic, but many sites actually suffer from over-tourism, and in this way, World Heritage inscription can also be a mixed blessing, because sites like Trang An in Vietnam, they have seen a very steep increase in visitation since their inscription on the World Heritage list, and there is a real need to put in place the management systems to ensure that this increase in tourism doesn't affect the outstanding universal value of these sites. Illegal resource use is an important issue. Poaching, timber logging for timber, poaching. We're thinking of rhinos, of course. These are the pictures from the northern white rhino, a subspecies that is now extinct in the wild, and that was found in the Garamba National Park in Congo. If we think about timber, we know the issues with rosewood, which is affecting some World Heritage sites in Madagascar and in Thailand. We have issues with illegal fishing and overfishing in many sites. And for these issues, we also try to work with our sister convention CITES, which deals with the trade in endangered species. Extractive industries, I think, is another important issue. This is a picture from Kakadu in Australia. Kakadu was the first site where the issue of mining really was brought to the attention of the committee when a new uranium mine was planned in that site. And since then, we have worked a lot also with the industry, and we have been able to secure no-go commitments from many companies in the world, including the International Council on Mining and Metal, which brings together the most important mining companies in the world. but also a lot of the oil and gas companies. Last year, we had a commitment made by BP and by Equinor, Statoil. We had commitments from Shell, from Total. So also a lot of the oil companies are making commitments on that. But it remains an important issue for World Heritage Sites, and it has led, for example, to the listing of the Arab Auric Sanctuary in Oman, where the government wanted to go forward with oil exploration. Hydropower, I think, is also an increasing issue, and hydropower inside sites is one issue. But I think one of the issues with hydropower is that sometimes hydropower far away from sites in the same catchment can still have important impacts on World Heritage Sites. An example here is Lake Turkana in Kenya, which is also inscribed on the World Heritage List in danger because of developments on the Gibe or Omo River in Ethiopia, which will restrict the flow of water into this exceptional lake area, which is an area, a lake that is in equilibrium between the water coming in and evapotranspiration, because there is no outlet to the sea, so it's very vulnerable for these type of developments. And we're very happy that this year we were able to get a commitment from the International Hydropower Association that hydropower development is now considered as not appropriate inside World Heritage Sites, and if it's happening outside, that appropriate measures should be taken to ensure that there are no impact on World Heritage Sites. And I think there is many cases also in India where hydropower could be an issue, and this is Manas in India, which could be affected by hydropower in Bhutan, and I think there are many other examples of this. And I think infrastructure is another important issue, infrastructure related to tourism, infrastructure related to roads, to other developments, which can affect World Heritage Sites. And in this perspective, I think it is extremely important to look at impacts and to do proper work on impacts assessments, so that we are ensured that there will be no impacts on the Outstanding Universal Value. We also have been working with banks and insurance companies to integrate in their investment policies provisions that they would not fund development, infrastructure development inside sites or in that would impact World Heritage Sites. For example, you might all know the International Finance Corporation performance standards, which are a little bit the golden standard in terms of what is needed in terms of environment, performance standard 6. And in the guidance on performance standard 6 of the International Finance Corporation, there is now clear reference to not having infrastructure development inside World Heritage Sites unless they are directly beneficial for the management of the site. And finally, there is the issue of management. I think the outlook also shows that, and perhaps this is the area where really conservation gains can be made. A lot of the World Heritage Sites still need to improve their management. And if we could improve the management of these sites, we would be able to also strengthen the conservation of the sites. We have been working on a number of instruments to look at management effectiveness together with IUCN. For many years already, there was this enhancing our heritage that was developed for natural sites. And currently, this is also being enlarged to encompass cultural sites, and there will be a new publication on that. And I think in terms of management, what is also extremely important is the work with the local communities, because often the management issues are not the animals in the site. The management issues are linked to the use of the natural resources and impacts from human use. And so the need to work with local communities to ensure that they can have sustainable development, which is not affecting the World Heritage Site. I think time is going, but I wanted to just quickly show a little bit the results of the outlook in the Asia-Pacific region. First in the Asia region. And when we look at the outlook there, I think it's slightly better than the overall picture of the convention. So I think that is good news. but still almost 1/3 of the sites have concerns in terms of their outlook. And the main issues, the main threats in Asia are hunting and natural resource related issues, tourism, over-tourism, as we already mentioned, and climate change on the third place. And I think in terms of management, again, almost half of the sites have concerns in terms of their management. And I think this is really a place where we can do more efforts, and where I think Wildlife Institute of India can also play an important role to see how we can improve the management of the sites in the Asia Pacific region. And I hope that the results of the periodic reporting and the action plan that comes out of that will help in bringing these figures further into the green. In terms of the Pacific region, a very similar situation in terms of the conservation outlook, perhaps a little bit more green here. Main threats in that region in the Pacific are invasive alien species, not unexpected given the fact that we have a lot of small island systems. Climate change, of course, you've all followed the discussion on the Great Barrier Reef, and if the Great Barrier Reef had to be inscribed on the list of World Heritage in danger because of the impacts of climate change. So a very important impact in this region. And actually fire, which is directly linked to that. We all saw the important fire issues we had last year in Australia. In terms of management, the situation is perhaps a little bit, it's better in the Pacific. But still we have 4% of sites with high concern, which could be a focus of our attention. Finally, to conclude, I wanted to say something about gaps in the list. I think we feel that in general, as I said before, the World Heritage List for natural heritage is actually quite complete and is also quite balanced. But still, there are, of course, some important gaps. And there was a number of studies done, which I would invite you to look into these gaps. There was a study done a couple of years ago by IUCN on terrestrial biodiversity, and another one on marine. And I think especially for marine, there could be really some areas that could be added to the list. I'm thinking of the Coral Triangle, for example, and areas like that. There was also some other thematic studies, including on desert landscapes. Very clearly, cold winter deserts are a gap on the World Heritage List, and they are mostly situated in Asia. So there is a potential to look into sites like that, and I think already some work is being done on that. And in general, I think Central Asia is a region where there is still quite some gaps on the list. So a lot of work can be done to still complete the World Heritage List. I think there is also potential for more transboundary sites. I think for the moment there are relatively few transboundary sites in the region. So I think that is also something to look into. It's of course politically more difficult and complicated, but there are really some very clear candidates. We've been talking for many years, for example, about Manas and a potential transboundary extension with Bhutan. In terms of gaps on the list, I think there is also in terms of terrestrial biodiversity, Borneo. There was an attempt a few years ago quite some years ago to develop a nomination on Borneo with Indonesia and Malaysia. Unfortunately, there were some questions by IUCN in terms of integrity, and very unfortunately, the file has not come back since then. I think this is really a very important priority area, but there are of course many others, and I think these studies can give some ideas on where we could put our attention for a next site. Thank you very much. I will keep it at that because I think my time is already completely used.
Thank you very much, Mr. Debonnet, for this really exhaustive presentation on World Heritage Sites, Outstanding Universal Value, and the specific reference to natural heritage. I think this was one of the most comprehensive presentations that we have come across, and very timely as well. We need to reach out to more stakeholders of World Heritage in general, and of course for natural heritage in particular. Also for your mention about the reporting and monitoring mechanisms, as well as the factors affecting the properties. I think very significantly, the challenges and threats need to be considered very seriously by the sites, the states, and the governments. And we need to take this forward, and hopefully in this current round of periodic reporting, the results and the action plans are able to completely consolidate and take a full-scale picture of what these issues are. So hopefully we can take this forward. Thank you very much, Mr. Debonnet. And although we are slightly just about cross the time, but I think we can still open up the floor to a couple of questions. If anybody would like to ask among the audience, if you could please raise your hand on the screen, and our guests may be able to take the questions answered. I request my colleague, Mr. Dhananjai Roy, to please coordinate any questions that may come up, either in the chat box or somebody wants to ask.
Thank you, Neeraj, sir, and a very big thank you to Mr. Debonnet for that exhaustive and complete analysis of how natural heritage stands, and especially in the Asia Pacific. Thank you so much, sir. And sir, we would just take a few more minutes of your precious time. There are a couple of interesting questions in there, sir, and one is from my colleague Anukul Nath about invasive species. Anukul, could you unmute yourself and speak about it?
So hello, Guy. I have a question on, although site managers are carrying out various management practices at ground level to eradicate invasive species, so is there any framework or policy to country or at a regional level to monitor and minimize the impact of invasive species in natural and mixed wildlife sites of Asia Pacific, and where we can also, the site managers can go for funding, because it takes quite a lot of money to eradicate invasives in case of plants. So if you have any idea on that.
Thank you very much for the question. I think indeed invasive species has been an underestimated issue in the convention, and I think the outlook really brought that issue forward as one of the major issues. And we need to really put more emphasis in the monitoring on that issue, and it's one of the things we are discussing with IUCN, how we can really look specifically in that issue. It's of course something that is not happening in all the sites, but in some sites it's a real significant threat. It is also, as you say, something that is very costly to address, because often things have to be done manual eradication, which is extremely costly. There are some success stories under the convention, especially on islands where it has been able to remove rats and other pests. But of course, in many sites, the issue is quite complicated. Well, in terms of funding, I think one of the things that really is, of course, a very big issue under this convention is that its funding mechanism, the World Heritage Fund, is completely inadequate. When the people, the fathers and the mothers of the convention designed the convention, they foresaw this World Heritage Fund with international assistance as a mechanism to be able to address some of the threats to the sites. But I think the issue is that at the time, people never imagined that we would go to more than 1,000 sites, and given the fact that the contribution of countries to the convention is capped, and that we can't have more countries adhering to the convention because we are almost having global coverage, the financial situation of the World Heritage Fund is not very good, and the fund is really only able to give seed small grants, seed funding, which can be very helpful in certain cases, but clearly it is not sufficient. So I think there is a need to look into other funding mechanisms. I think one of the things we have, for example, also provided comments to the CBD in terms of priorities for the GEF. So I think GEF funding can be a possibility for some of the sites, or funding coming from other international funding mechanisms. But clearly, I would totally agree with you that the funding mechanism of the convention is really the weak part of this convention, because if the world recognizes that these are the most important sites, and also recognizes the convention, through the convention, that there is a need for international solidarity, then it should also have created a mechanism to make that international solidarity tangible. And that mechanism is there, the World Heritage Fund, but it's completely insufficient and has been passed by the number of sites that we have been getting on the World Heritage List.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Anupul, for that question. And sir, one last question. Since you had brought up examples, you mentioned that there were some cases which the convention helped out. Another colleague of mine, Pallavi Chakrabarti, she has a question on over-tourism and something else. Pallavi, if you want to bring up a question, please.
Hello, Mr. Debonnet. Thank you very much for the presentation. My question is, one of the most pertinent threats of the World Heritage Sites in Asia is over-tourism. Since tourism is a major revenue source in the PAs in the region, is there any way UNESCO can suggest measures in making tourism more sustainable? Are there any successful examples of such an intervention in the international community? Thank you.
Yes, thanks a lot for that question. I think indeed the over-tourism is probably the threat that is actually linked to the status. You know, it's one of the threats that is almost provoked by becoming World Heritage, because most sites have a sharp increase in visitation after they become World Heritage. And of course, that is also a motivation for countries to get sites inscribed, because it can also bring funding for the site, but it also comes with a lot of challenges. For that reason, we have the World Heritage Tourism Program. The World Heritage Committee established this World Heritage Tourism Program, and they have been working on a number of tools to